Trump is an idiot. Trump is an idiot who employs other idiots. Trump is an idiot who thinks Jimmy Kimmel and Al Pacino are the same guy. Stupid Jimmy Kimmel. That really should be read as if you're Homer Simpson. Stupid Jimmy Kimmel, who still hasn't recovered from his horrendous performance and big ratings drop as host of the Academy Awards, especially when he showed he suffered from TDS, commonly known as Trump derangement syndrome, to the entire world by reading on air my truth about how bad a job he was doing that night, right before he stumbled through announcing the biggest award of all, Picture of the Year. It was a classic choke, one of the biggest ever in show business, and to top it off, he forgot to say the famous and mandatory line, "and the winner is." Instead, he stammered around as he opened the envelope. Defendant J. Trump, that was Al Pacino. Al Pacino was the one with the envelope and the Movie of the Year award. Of course, everybody mistakes Jimmy Kimmel for Al Pacino. You know, everybody whose brain does not work right. I am now waiting for his explanation. Trump was testing you. Didn't you know that, stupid libs? I mean, they're both, Jimmy Kimmel and Al Pacino, they're both liberals, so he's being metaphorical. It's like, you know, Nancy Pelosi and Nancy Culp from the Beverly Hillbillies. Well, he did it to enrage Trump derangement syndrome victims. It's a pun. That's the explanation. It's a pun. He was just checking to see if you were reading all the way through his posts. It's a palindrome. Kimmel and Pacino are spelled the same way backwards as forwards. Kimmel spells Kimmel, and Lemmik spells Pacino. This also happened on March 10th, 2024. And Trump posted about it because he heard about Kimmel making jokes about his trial. Everybody's making jokes about his trial. Trump should plead guilty. It would be far less damaging to him than 2 more days of this as the trial resumes today. He's fallen asleep at least 3 times, and it's being reported now in the right-wing media. But he's going to go after Jimmy Kimmel for something that happened March 10th, and he's complaining about it on April 17th. Trump is an idiot. And Trump, moreover, is an idiot who employs idiots. Yes, day 3 of jury selection at the trial in New York. And this is the more important part about Trump being an idiot who does not know the difference between Al Pacino and Jimmy Kimmel. I mean, if you say you don't know the difference between Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, okay. Jimmy Kimmel? When you spend nearly 78 years, as Trump has spent, avoiding reality, you miss stuff like this. That in a jury trial, each side can only remove, disqualify, void so many juror candidates just 'cause. You only have so many strikes. They call them strikes. There's a finite number. It's agreed to in advance by both sides, or there are laws, depending on which kind of court you're in. I thought strikes were supposed to be unlimited when we were picking our jury, Trump wrote. I was then told we only had 10, not nearly enough. Well, wait. I thought strikes were supposed to be unlimited? So in other words, every juror who came up, Trump thought either they would say, I love Donald Trump because I have the brains of a sandwich, or they would have been stricken. Every one of them. The first 20, the first 2,000, the first million, the first billion. No trial in history has ever had unlimited jury strikes because what the defense could do would be to then strike every potential juror, to go through literally everybody on earth, and then the trial would never happen. And if you could bore down into Trump's brain, I wouldn't recommend it, but if you could do that, I wonder if you would find him actually believing that that was the case, that he was entitled to vet and strike 3 or 4 billion potential jurors. And of course, he would have no idea that it would be that money because he does not know how many people there are on the earth. He doesn't know how many countries there are. He's already shown that. He has no idea whether a crowd of 20,000 people represents a measurable portion of the earth's population or it's, 20,000 people. And it's, of course, made worse by the fact that Trump employs idiots, legal idiots. Alina Habba, who has been busted from the lead lawyer on some of the Jack Smith's prosecutions of Trump, described on Fox News the other night as Trump legal spokesperson. Alina Habba, who is the world's leading authority in that vast area known as parking lot law, went on Fox and said, "We are seeing a painful selection," referring to the jury selection, which was supposed to go on for 6 or 8 million years while we go through everybody on the earth because Trump believed he had unlimited strikes rather than 10. "We're seeing a painful selection," Alina Habba said, "because we're in the state of New York, which is definitely by design. There is no question that Bragg bringing this in New York," and then she wandered off to talk about Atlanta and the District of Columbia, "these venues are selected exactly for this reason." I'm hoping that she is only so stupid that she was trying to convince Trump's morons, Trump's cult members, Trump's brain-damaged supporters. I'm hoping she's only stupid enough that she was trying to convince them that this is true, that these were chosen venues in which to prosecute, because to everybody else, it should be obvious that if a crime, or even just an alleged crime, takes place in New York, the trial is going to be in New York. There are certain extreme circumstances in which a city or state trial will be relocated elsewhere, usually within the same state, but it's been known to happen in smaller states to move the trial elsewhere. Federal trials are moved out of state all the time. But the prosecution of Donald Trump for crimes committed in New York, the trial is being conducted in New York because he was in New York when he did what they say is illegal, or what they allege he did. Oh, for God's sakes, please tell me this woman doesn't really believe what she said. I mean, she also went on Newsmax and said the same thing. Also, the visit to the bodega Tuesday, the stunt, the traditional Trump exploitation of somebody dying, where he went to the bodega in Harlem and probably thought, so, this is Harlem. I thought about coming here once before in 1953. Oh. He went to a bodega in Harlem where a bodega owner shot a robber and was briefly charged for an illegal possession of a firearm, and then the charges were dropped by Alvin Bragg, and they did a stunt. There were cheering crowds at the bodega in Harlem. And you know who arranged them and who the cheering crowds consisted of? Members of the New York Young Republicans Club. How do we know that? Because Trump is an idiot and he employs idiots. These kids could not keep their effing mouths shut. The chief of the New York Young Republicans Club, also known as We Have No Education or Hope Club, Gavin Wax, not W-A-C-H-S, but wax, as in, yeah, Doc, I can't hear out of this ear. I feel like there's some Gavin Wax in my ear. He could not help himself. He boasted on social media that he arranged it. He and the heads of the Hispanic subgroup that belongs to the New York Young Republicans Club. They took a team photo of themselves at the bodega and never thought for a second that if there were a team photo of them at the bodega, that then wide-eyed people who don't like Trump happen to have the resources to look at the picture of all of these basically Trump employees and then look at the pictures of the crowds cheering Trump and notice they're the same people. Never thought for a second, hey, wait, don't take the picture or put out the tweet. That way they can identify us and find out that we're AstroTurf. Young Republicans. A life already lost. A brain is a mind that is a terrible, I'm just doing the Trump version of a mind is a terrible thing to waste. On the other hand, if you have no mind, remember the old saying, no pain, no gain, but no brain, no pain. In short, looking at the trial, Trump should have stayed in bed, or at least taken another nap. They resumed today the trial of the Trump charges in New York, as opposed to holding the trial in Alaska. They have already selected 7 of the 18 jurors needed. There are only 10 strikes, not infinity. There's not a line of 1 billion potential jurors. Unlimited strikes. And I don't like that four-person. Jimmy Kimmel clarifying the issue of the four-person. I heard this all day yesterday. I asked it myself in a couple of occasions and was asked it several times, and then the light bulb went off over my head. Juror B400. Bingo! Juror B400 is the four-person. He's the one who lives in West Harlem now, but was originally from Ireland. He was a waiter. He now works in sales. He has some college education, did not get a degree. He is married. His spouse is in school. There are no children. In his spare time, he's outdoorsy. And then here's the line that confused people. Gets news from the New York Times, the Daily Mail, some Fox, and some MSNBC. And on the right and on the left, that combination, some Fox and some MSNBC for his news, the man must be an idiot. The man must be fabricated. There's no such person. He just lied. Why didn't they use one of their infinity strikes to keep him off there? Nobody watches Fox and MSNBC. I know exactly what it is. And I don't know why it didn't dawn on me the moment that I read this. When he said some Fox and some MSNBC in New York, it's very simple. Fox is Channel 5. They carry the Fox broadcast network, The Simpsons, which I was on once, Family Guy, which I was on once, Fox Football, which I used to be on, Fox Baseball, which I used to anchor. It's the Fox station. There's a newscast 2 or 3 times a day on the Fox station. One of them is at 10 o'clock, and it's been on so long that I was an intern on the show in 1978, long before there was a Fox. The Fox News at 10. Then it was the Channel 5 News at 10. So when the guy says he watches his news, some Fox and some MSNBC, he's, going back and forth between Rosanna Scotto and Katie Tur. Oh, God. Why did I have to bring up that name? Oh, God. What was I thinking? So much for the Trump legal news. If you thought Bill Barr, Trump's former attorney general, was dead, only ethically. The man who supported Jack Smith's prosecutions of Trump, the man who actually resigned more than a month before the end of the Trump presidency because he saw how it was going to end, he now told Fox News, I've said all along, given 2 bad choices, I think it's my duty to pick the person I think would do the least harm to the country, and in my mind, I will vote the Republican ticket. I'll support the Republican ticket. I have described previously the fact that Bill Barr's father, the former headmaster at the Dalton School, who was somehow involved in the hiring of Jeffrey Epstein there at the start of his, quote, teaching, quote, career, quote. It's not clear if he actually hired him because Bill Barr's father, Donald Barr, changed jobs between the interview of Epstein at the Dalton School in Manhattan and his next job, where he became the headmaster in 1975 of the Hackley School in suburban New York. Tarrytown, New York. Hackley School. Chris Berman, class of 73. Keith Olbermann, class of 75. Nearly ran the place into the ground. Incompetent, a liar, a bad headmaster, and clearly an even worse father. Let me run a couple of other headlines. Impeachment. They brought 2 charges against the Secretary of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas. They brought them over to the Senate, and the Senate promptly dismissed them. By Felicia. It happened so fast that Marjorie Bitter Green never knew what hit her. Back in the House, where they're still talking about, and that is the point of it, the point of talking about impeachment is to talk about impeachment, not to actually impeach anybody. Jamie Raskin disassembled Jamie Comer in the ongoing saga of when on earth are the Republicans going to have a vote about impeaching the President of the United States? The answer is they're not. They're using their infinity strikes. Raskin pressed Comer to impeach Biden now. Raskin at one point said, "What is the crime that you want to impeach Joe Biden for? Tell America right now." And Comer said, "You're about to find out very soon." As somebody wrote on Twitter, "The crime? You don't know her. She goes to a different school." I'm not sure what the hidden trick here is. The Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, may have done something that the Russians will be mad at him about. He may have done something to help Ukraine and to help our allies du jour in the Middle East, to, help America's standing as trying to be for something internationally and against something, namely Russian aggression. Mike Johnson's package is now visible. Yes, I'm 65 years old, and I still think like I did when I was 12 or 13. Separate aid bills to be voted on Saturday night, unless Marjorie Taylor Greene and Chip Roy and the rest of them make him disappear, that is Johnson, by Saturday night. Mike Gallagher, the resigning congressman, is delaying his resignation so he can stay in the House through Saturday so he can vote on it in favor. It will be carried, if it is appropriate, by Democrats. And then next week, we can all watch 2 things go on simultaneously. The actual start of opening statements and presumably testimony in the Trump trial, and Mike Johnson getting his package cut off by Republicans. Remember the NPR guy, Uri Berliner, the editor who turned himself into a right-wing hero by claiming that there are no right-wingers working at NPR? Like that wasn't the result of excellent management and natural selection? Then they suspended him because he wrote this article about NPR, vivisecting NPR from the inside. And guess what? NPR employees need permission to do outside media work, so they suspended him for 5 days because almost everybody who works anywhere in media knows you can't go work for somebody else, particularly if you have a contract or a union deal, without the permission of your boss. Nothing I have ever written anywhere for a company that was not my primary employer did not occur without the consent of my primary employer. In fact, one of the last things that ever happened to me at ESPN, I wrote a piece for Baseball America, a publication about, surprisingly enough, baseball in America, and ESPN got all honked off about it and threatened to suspend me because I'd done outside media work. And then I did some public service announcements against chewing tobacco and the cancer risk of them, and I had not gotten these things pre-approved. And I said, whoa. You want to come out that you've suspended me because I was fighting cancer and donating my work to these announcements being played at the ballparks? You want to be seen as pro-cancer? And ESPN did, and they were seen as pro-cancer. In any event, this guy, Uri Berliner, violates his own contract or his union deal, writes negatively about his own employers, They suspend him for 5 days. Trust me, I know my suspensions. 5 days is nothing. 5 days you should be able to do standing on your head. 5 days, come on. NBC wanted to suspend me for the rest of the 21st century. 5 days. So what does Uri Berliner do? He issues this statement: I am resigning from NPR, a great American institution where I have worked for 25 years. I don't support calls to defund NPR. I respect the integrity of my colleagues and wish for NPR to thrive and do important journalism. Thought bubble. Except all those bastards I talked about and wrote about in my piece. But I cannot work in a newsroom where I am disparaged by a new CEO whose divisive views confirm the very problems at NPR I cite in my free press essay. Goodbye, cruel world. Bye, Felicia. I recognize this immediately. This is what actually happened here. Mr. Berliner, I believe, was going to quit anyway. He wanted to take the place down with him, so he pulled this stunt. I tried this once at NBC when I was much younger, and let me tell you, it doesn't work. It's a nice idea until when you leave, they don't go out of business. And then what happens? You're the one who goes out of business, Uri Berliner. Ich bin ein jelly donut. And a sports headline. Remember that obscure Toronto Raptors basketball player, the boutique bets on whom were the biggest payoffs in legal gambling, like on 2 nights in all the sports books in the ubiquitous world of sports gambling, in which sooner rather than later, some of these sports gambling houses will own NBA and Major League Baseball and maybe NFL teams. There was this guy, Jonte Porter. People made fortunes because Jonte Porter missed the only shot he took in his 4 minutes of game action, and they made hundreds or thousands of dollars on that fact. And then people began to wonder if perhaps Jonte Porter was involved in this in some way. Well, yesterday, the commissioner of the National Basketball Association, Adam Silver, suspended Jonte Porter for life. And all I can say is, I hope Mr. Porter bet the over. Okay, if the show sounded a little different, this is because I ad-libbed nearly all of it just now. Everything's fine, don't get alarmed, but as you know, I have 4 dogs, 2 of whom are rescues, one of whom is nearly 17 years old, and the last couple of days have been very busy. When you are a nearly 17-year-old dog, when you are a dog who was born in the year 2007, life is somewhat lived on the edge, and for a period of time this week, it did not look like Minet was in good shape. It turns out he just had a bad reaction to some medication, but this has taken up a lot of time this week, and I kind of ran into a little bit of a crunch time-wise. So I had a choice of giving you an ad-libbed, kind of breezy edition of Countdown today, or none whatsoever. So I gave you this. If it sucked, I apologize. The good news is Minet is fine. He greeted me at the door, and Minet had a stroke several years ago. Minet greeted me at the door when I came home in the afternoon after he was seen by the vet. Minet greeted me at the door, and I picked him up, and I said, "You're going to give me a kiss?" And he gave me a kiss, which usually tells me he's okay. That and the fact that he peed on the pad. These are the 2 signs of happy, resourceful life when you're a 17-year-old or nearly dog. So the day was devoted to Minet. You got this, and an edition of things I promise not to tell, which I will select during the commercial and play for you after this. I don't know what's next. That's next. This is Countdown. To the number 1 story on the Countdown and my favorite topic, me and things I promised not to tell. And somebody sent me a video of him the other day, and I laughed again, and I flashed back again. And now you get to hear about him, too. From the desert to the sea to all of Southern California, good evening. You may or may not have ever heard of Jerry Dunphy, That statement that you may or may not have ever heard of Jerry Dunphy just sent anybody from Southern California who was more than 35 years old into a deep, stunned silence, because Jerry Dunphy was ubiquitous on TV news in Los Angeles from 1960 until 2002. He died a week after his last newscast, and there are some in the business who half seriously believe he may show up again sooner or later on TV, even though he's dead. He worked for Channel 2. And he and his team won all the ratings wars for 15 years. And then, one year, the station finished only tied for first in the spring L.A. ratings of 1975. So the CBS corporate geniuses in New York fired him, and he went to Channel 7 like 36 hours later. And then Channel 7 won nearly all the ratings periods there over 14 years. And then after 6 years at Channel 9, he was hired back at Channel 2, where he started, where they fired him. Hired back at Channel 2 for a couple million more than he was making when they fired him 20 years earlier, and then he went back to Channel 9 and he was still on every night at the age of 80. And oh, by the way, he worked for 29 years after he came out of the KABC studios on the night of October 24th, 1983, hopped into his Rolls Royce with the station makeup lady by his side, and was ambushed and shot in the neck by 4 assailants, leading him to issue the memorable statement, "They said don't move, and I didn't, but they shot anyway," unquote. And they never figured out who shot him or why, but Jerry Dunphy was back on the air 3 weeks later anyway, and you cannot imagine how many different guesses there were about that in the LA news industry when I was on the air there from 1985 through 1991. There is no question that in creating the fictional newscasters Ted Baxter and Kent Brockman, and maybe even Ron Burgundy, much was stolen from Jerry Dunphy. Jerry Dunphy had a huge shock of white hair, a craggy face, and a rich baritone voice. He was in 21 different movies, including Oh God, and the amazing Anne Margaret flick Kitten with a Whip. No, really, there is an Anne Margaret film called Kitten with a Whip. Anyway, I knew Jerry Dunphy. He was a smart man and a nice and a welcoming man, and obviously quite a businessman, but he did have a tendency on the air to become, in his own words, a teleprompter reading machine. He said, "You put it up there, and I'm going to say it down here." And that's what this story is about. When I got to Los Angeles at the age of 26 in 1985, our newscast, Channel 5 News at 10, was like something out of the 1960s. The studio had carpeting on the walls. There were no graphics to speak of, just a big rear screen projection device. Our best reporter, the lovely Stan Chambers, had literally worked there since the station had signed on the air for the first time 38 years before, and he would keep working there for another 25 years. Our inimitable anchorman Hal Fishman would not wear an IFB, an earpiece, because he thought viewers might think that if he did, it was because he needed a hearing aid. He did, however, wear one of a series of toupees of different length to simulate the need for a haircut. Until the first commercial break was over on News at 10, only Hal spoke. His female co-anchor just sat there adoringly, and the producer was a marvelously frantic character named Jerry Rubin, who every night at 9 p.m., an hour to airtime, would run around the newsroom screaming, "Battle stations! Battle stations!" And who took me seriously only when I could figure out what his, as Jerry phrased it, invisible thread was running through his nightly ordering of the stories, the rundown. He would ask me to come into the newsroom and look at the rundown and say, "All right, Olbermann, you're so smart. What's the invisible thread?" And he only began to like me when I could recite to him from memory the starting lineup of his beloved 1945 Chicago Cubs. But he stayed liking me. We remained friends for 30 years. Anyway, Jerry had come to Los Angeles in 1969, hired away from WGN in Chicago to become the lead writer for, this is where the story comes together, you guessed it, the Jerry Dunphy newscasts on KNXT, the CBS station in Los Angeles. In fact, after winning every sweeps period for 9 years, the newscast had rightly become The Big News with Jerry Dunphy. And it began with an unseen announcer intoning, "The Big News with Jerry Dunphy. Now, here is Jerry Dunphy." And then Jerry Dunphy said his catchphrase, the catchphrase of all catchphrases. Unlike the guy I worked with in New York when I was an intern, Bill Jorgensen, "Thank you for your time, this time till next time," Jerry Dunphy said, "From the desert to the sea to all of Southern California, good evening." Nonsense, of course, but boy, it sounded good. "From the desert to the sea to all of Southern California, good evening." He said this so often that it is still used in some promotional announcements by Channel 9 News in Los Angeles and Channel 7 News in Los Angeles and Channel 2 in Los Angeles. "From the desert to the sea to all of Southern California, good evening, I'm dead." Well, no, they don't actually say that, but that's pretty much what it means. The only joke about the night he got shot outside the parking lot that I can tell is that when the cops arrived, Dunphy said to them, "From the desert to the sea to all of Southern California, good evening, I've been shot in the neck." The first night my friend Jerry Rubin sat down to write The Big News with Jerry Dunphy, Jerry Rubin was a little nervous. He got there early, he said. He wrote some stories 12 times each, trying to get it perfect. Finally, for the lead story, which, if memory serves, was about a bank robbery in Pasadena, Jerry got it just right. And on that 1969 evening at 6 p.m., viewers of The Big News on Channel 2 in Los Angeles, those for whom From the Desert to the Sea to all of Southern California was not a cliche but mantra, they heard the familiar Channel 2 screeching theme music and then The Big News with Jerry Dunphy. Now here is Jerry Dunphy. And up popped Jerry Dunphy's face and he said, "3 armed and very dangerous modern-day desperados are still loose in Pasadena tonight after blah, 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 blah." The newscast ended an hour later. Jerry Rubin was very relieved. Jerry Dunphy strode back to his desk before presumably going out to warm up the Rolls Royce and avoid the gunmen who would finally get him 14 years later and not even slow him down. And that's when the station's news director leaned out of his office and waved the 2 Jerrys inside. "What the hell happened, Dunphy? Did you retire it? You can't retire it. It's in the contract. You have to stay it." According to Jerry Rubin, Dunphy looked blankly at his boss. Jerry Rubin said he was even more confused himself. "From the desert to the sea. You didn't say from the desert to the sea. At the start of the Big News, you say from the desert to the sea to all of Southern California, good evening. Only tonight you didn't say from the desert to the sea to all of Southern California, good evening. You said something about a bank. What the hell, Jerry? We got 250 phone calls." Jerry Dunphy now pursed his lips and turned to the new writer. "What the hell, Rubin? Didn't you put it in the script?" Jerry Rubin kept this part to himself, but frankly, he said he couldn't believe what he was hearing. For 9 years, this man Dunphy had signed on virtually every one of his news broadcasts every night at 6, and then again every night at 11 by saying from the desert to the sea to all of Southern California, good evening. But apparently, if you did not write it in the script and did not put it on the teleprompter for him, he would forget it. Before Jerry Rubin could say anything, Jerry Dunphy barked at him with some understanding. "Don't you understand? When I'm out there, I'm a teleprompter reading machine. You put it up there, I'm going to say it down here. You don't put it up there, I'm not going to say it down here." The news director looked sternly at Jerry Rubin. Jerry Rubin did not burst into uncontrollable laughter, race from the building KNXT was in on Sunset Boulevard, and get on the first plane back to Chicago. He just said, "Yes, sir." And the news director said, "Good." And everybody left, and from that night at 11 o'clock onwards, Jerry Rubin always started his script for the lead story by typing out from the desert to the sea to all of Southern California, good evening. There's a 26-car pileup on the Santa Monica Freeway after another mattress has been dumped in the left lane. Or from the desert to the sea to all of Southern California, good evening, Burbank Bank burgled. Or whatever. Over the next few weeks, the lead story on The Big News with Jerry Dunphy would change, as lead stories do. at 5 p.m. or 5:30 or 5:50, something bigger would happen, and it was the big news. So Jerry Rubin would often have to rewrite page 1 of the script. And every time he rewrote it, and every time he rewrote it, and the one time he told me that he rewrote it, Jerry remembered to start page 1 with, "From the desert to the sea to all of Southern California, good evening." All was well. The teleprompter reading machine was happy. The news director was happy. Jerry Rubin was happy. And then calamity struck. At about 5:58 one night, Jerry Rubin was told there is a refinery fire in Torrance. It is the new lead story. Just say we're rushing a crew. Get it written. He started to type our top story, breaking news, a refinery, and then he tore the page from his machine. He started anew. His fingers danced across the keyboard. From the desert to the sea to all of Southern California. Good evening. Our top story tonight, breaking news. A refinery fire has just erupted in Torrance. A Channel 2 Big News live crew is rushing to the scene at this hour, and we will have a big news live report from Rick Davis before this newscast is over. Rubin knew he did not have time to get a production assistant to take the new lead script into Dunphy, nor to tape it into the script about to pass through the teleprompter, so he did both things himself. "New lead!" he screamed at Dunphy, throwing the page at him, and the unseen announcer was already at mid-introduction when Jerry Rubin taped that new piece of script into the prompter without remembering to remove the old lead script from the prompter. And this is what Los Angeles heard. The big news with Jerry Dunphy. Now here is Jerry Dunphy. From the desert to the sea to all of Southern California, good evening. Our top story tonight, breaking news. A refinery fire has just erupted in Torrance. A Channel 2 Big News live crew is rushing to the scene at this hour, and we will have a big news live report from Rick Davis before this newscast is over. Jerry Dunphy dramatically turned over page 1 and began to read page 2. From the desert to the sea to all of Southern California, good evening. Our top story tonight, Mayor Sam Yorty said... Jerry Rubin said... My head dropped to my desk with a thud. I've done all the damage I can do here. Thank you for listening. Countdown musical directors Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel arranged, produced, and performed most of our music. Mr. Ray was on guitars, bass, and drums, and Mr. Chanel handled orchestration and keyboards, and it was produced by TKO Brothers. I saw Tom Hanks about 2 years after the incident at the Oscars. Having lunch, in he walked, and on the way out, he came by a side door and leaned in the window and talked to me and my friend Hank, appropriately enough. Lovely guy, Tom Hanks. Other music, including some of the Beethoven compositions, arranged and performed by the group No Horns Allowed. The sports music is the Olbermann theme from ESPN2. It was written by Mitch Warren Davis and appears courtesy of ESPN Inc. Our pithy and satirical musical comments are by Nancy Faust, the best baseball stadium organist ever. Our announcer today was my friend, the actor Jonathan Banks. Everything else was pretty much my fault. So that's countdown for this, the 203rd day until the 2024 presidential election, the 1,198th day since defendant J. Trump's first attempted coup against the democratically elected government of the United States, used the 14th Amendment and the not regularly given elector objection provided by the Supreme Court, used the Insurrection Act, used the justice system, used the mental health system to stop him from doing it again while we still can. The next scheduled countdown is tomorrow, bulletins as the news warrants. Till then, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and the last one. Oh, that's right. Good luck.